It's 11:47 at night. You're in bed. The room is dark except for the rectangle of light in your hand, and you've been scrolling for longer than you planned. You told yourself 10 minutes. That was 40 minutes ago. You're not watching anything in particular. You're not looking for anything. You're just moving through it. A vacation you weren't invited on. A kitchen renovation that cost more than your rent. A body that looks like it was designed rather than lived in. Someone your age who somehow already owns property and has the kind of ease in front of a camera that suggests they've never been unsure of themselves in their life. You put the phone down. The ceiling is dark. Something in your chest is heavier than it was when you picked the phone up. You don't call it anything. You don't name it. You just lie there, and after a minute you pick the phone back up. That feeling has a shape. It arrives in a specific order. First, something catches your attention, not because it's remarkable, but because it looks effortless. Second, something in your body registers the gap between that image and where you currently are. Third, and this is the part nobody talks about honestly, you keep scrolling. Not to feel better, not even consciously. You just keep going. That sequence matters. It means something is happening that isn't just passive consumption. Your brain is running a comparison. It didn't ask your permission to run. Leon Festinger proposed in 1954 that humans have a drive to evaluate their opinions and abilities, and that when objective standards aren't available, they do it by looking at other people. He called it social comparison theory. The relevant part isn't that we compare, it's that the drive is automatic. It's not a personality flaw. It's not vanity. It's how the system works. The problem is that the system was not designed for what you're feeding it at 11:47 at night. For most of human history, the people you compared yourself to were the people in your immediate environment. The same village, the same neighborhood, the same school hallway. Your comparison pool was maybe a few dozen people, most of whom you knew well enough to understand that their life had texture. Bad mornings, embarrassing moments, weeks where nothing worked. You knew the version of them that existed in between the good parts. What you're looking at now has no in-between. It has been selected, filtered, timed, and in many cases, professionally lit. Not because the people posting it are dishonest, necessarily, but because that's what the format rewards. Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, these platforms are built around engagement metrics. Content that generates strong emotional responses gets amplified. Content that looks like the life people wish they had tends to generate strong emotional responses. The architecture of the platform and the architecture of your nervous system are running on different agendas. The platform is optimizing for time on screen. Your nervous system is trying to locate itself in a social hierarchy, the way it has always tried to locate itself, because for most of human history, knowing where you stood socially was connected to survival. Neither of them is thinking about your actual well-being. Here's the part that's harder to sit with. The comparison isn't neutral. Research on social comparison, and I want to be careful here because this field has real findings, but also a lot of studies that haven't replicated cleanly, tends to support that upward comparison. Comparing yourself to someone you perceive as doing better is associated with decreased positive affect. That is, it tends to make people feel worse about themselves and their circumstances. What's less often talked about is that the effect isn't uniform. There's a difference between looking at someone's life and feeling inspired versus looking at someone's life and feeling like the gap between you and them is permanent. The first can be motivating. The second doesn't function like motivation at all. It functions more like proof of something you already half believed about yourself. The question worth sitting with isn't why social comparison happens. It's why, for you, it so often lands in the second category. You scroll past someone who seems to be living exactly the version of your life you haven't figured out yet. The apartment is right. The relationship looks easy. They're traveling somewhere you've been meaning to go for 3 years. They seem, from every visible angle, to have gotten something you can't quite name, but have been reaching for. And underneath the specific envy, and it is envy, it's okay to call it that, there's something older. something that arrived before social media, before the internet, before any of this. It's the feeling that other people received instructions you didn't, that somewhere there's a version of being a person that works, and that version is for someone else. Social media didn't create that feeling. It gives it a face. It gives it a new face every 30 seconds in high resolution with a soundtrack. There's a concept in psychology sometimes called the highlight reel problem, though that's a colloquial term, not a clinical one. The observation is simple enough. What you see online is a curated selection of someone's best or most visually compelling moments, not a representative sample of their life. You know this. Everyone knows this. Knowing it doesn't fully protect you from the comparison because your brain is not primarily responding to the information. It's responding to the image. This is worth pausing on. You can hold two facts simultaneously. This person's life is more complicated than their feed, and I still feel like I'm behind. And the second one doesn't dissolve just because the first one is true. That's not irrationality. That's the gap between knowing something and feeling something. The two systems don't always talk to each other. The reason knowing doesn't fully land is that the comparison isn't really about them. It's about you. What their life or their curated version of it is activating is a story you already carry about what you should have done by now, what you should look like, where you should be. They're just the mirror. Boredom is underrated in this conversation. You're most likely to reach for your phone when you're doing something that doesn't fully occupy you, or when you're avoiding something that does. Late at night, waiting, the moment between finishing one thing and starting the next. Early morning before you've decided what the day is. The scroll doesn't usually start as a conscious decision. It starts as a reflex, something to do with the hands while the mind isn't otherwise committed. And what the algorithm feeds into that unguarded moment is not random. Variable reward schedules, intermittent, unpredictable positive feedback, are the most effective conditioning mechanisms studied in behavioral research. This is not a conspiracy. It's the same mechanism that makes slot machines work, the same mechanism that made checking email compulsive before social media existed. The platforms have tuned this deliberately because attention is the product. Your attention is worth money, and the best way to hold it is to make the next thing feel like it might be the thing that satisfies the feeling. It never is. That's the design. What's harder to explain, and I want to be honest that I'm in more interpretive territory here, less settled science, is why the dissatisfaction doesn't lead to stopping. You feel worse. You keep scrolling. The loop closes on itself. Part of it is functional. The negative feeling of comparison activates something that looks like a search state. Your brain shifts into seeking mode, looking for resolution, for something that will close the loop, and scrolling mimics seeking. The motion of it, the pace of it, the possibility that the next thing might be different, all of that can feel temporarily like doing something about the feeling, even when it's making the feeling worse. The other part is simpler. It's avoidance. The phone is easier than whatever else you would be doing. Whatever you're carrying tonight, the thing you haven't dealt with, the conversation you haven't had, the project you've been circling for weeks, the phone holds it at a distance. Even if holding it at a distance feels bad, it can feel like less work than looking directly at it. There is a specific quality to the envy that social media generates that's different from the envy you might feel in ordinary life. In ordinary life, you usually have enough information about the person to contextualize what you're envying. You know what they gave up. You know what their life costs them. You know, even dimly, that they have problems you don't have. Online, you often don't. And the mind, in the absence of that information, tends to construct a complete picture from the partial image it's given. It fills in the gaps generously. The person in the vacation photo isn't just on vacation, they're someone for whom life works out. The person with the relationship that looks easy isn't just photographed well, they're someone who doesn't lie awake wondering. You are comparing the entire interior experience of your life against the exterior presentation of someone else's. Everything you know about your own anxiety, your own doubt, your own mediocre Tuesdays, against someone else's best Saturday. That comparison cannot be fair. It's structurally impossible for it to be fair, and yet you keep running it. The thing nobody says about this, because it doesn't fit the kind of content that performs well, is that wanting what someone else has isn't always a problem to be fixed. Sometimes it's information. If you look at someone's creative work and feel something that isn't quite admiration and isn't quite jealousy, that particular ache, it might be telling you something about what you want that you haven't let yourself want directly. If you look at someone's life and feel grief rather than motivation, it might be worth asking what it is specifically you're mourning. The comparison hurts most when it lands on something you haven't given yourself permission to care about. The life you think you should want and the life you actually want don't always match, and the gap between them can be invisible until a stranger's photograph makes it suddenly briefly visible. That discomfort is uncomfortable. It's also not nothing. Here is what is probably true about the person whose life is making you feel this way tonight. They are carrying something you cannot see, not as a comforting platitude, as a structural fact about what photographs can contain. The financial stress, if it exists. The relationship tension, if it exists. The days when they don't feel like the version of themselves they post. All of that is behind the frame. This isn't about deciding they're secretly miserable so you feel better. It's about recognizing that what you're responding to is an image, and images are selections. They contain what was chosen to be in them. The other thing that's probably true, they've looked at someone else's life at 11 at night and felt some version of what you're feeling right now. This is not a you problem. It's a very old human thing wearing new clothes. None of this resolves the feeling immediately. You know that. You've probably read versions of this before, and at the end of reading them, you still pick the phone back up. That's not a failure of understanding. That's the difference between understanding something and having changed your relationship to it. The relationship doesn't change from a single insight. It changes from noticing over time what the pattern costs you, what state you're in when you reach for the phone, what you're avoiding, what the comparison is actually about, underneath the specific face it's wearing tonight. That noticing doesn't happen in the middle of the scroll. It happens in the moment before. The moment you register the impulse but haven't acted on it yet. That gap is small. It doesn't always feel like a choice, but it's where the choice lives. It's past midnight now. The phone is still in your hand. You know this loop. You've been in it before. You'll be in it again. The question isn't whether to feel the comparison. That's not a lever you can pull. The question is whether you want to spend the next 20 minutes feeding it, or whether you want to put the phone down and lie in the dark with whatever it stirred up. The dark is uncomfortable. What it stirred up is uncomfortable, but it's yours. It's the actual texture of your life, not someone else's version of theirs. And your life, for all of its ordinary Tuesdays and unsettled questions and things you haven't figured out yet, it's happening now, in real time, in a way no photograph can hold. That's not nothing. That's the whole thing.